Hey everybody, here we are today in Redhead, St. John, New Brunswick, Canada, and we're about to go see a somewhat forgotten fort that has significance to both the American Civil War as well as Canadian Confederation. This fort, it's in really bad condition, and as it is close to the side of a bank, we don't want you guys coming here. It's on private property for one, and also it's just incredibly dangerous. So you'll see as we go into the site what we mean. So as we walk into the site, you'll see here there's quite a few trees growing. At the time that this fort was built, there would have been no trees at all. So this would have all been cleared out, and it most likely would have been farmers' fields. So you wouldn't want to have trees in your line of fire, especially how this is going to the back side of the fort. You wouldn't want to be ambushed, and you need clear line of sight. So as we walk along this four-wheeler trail, you can see this slight hill. And what this hill is called is a traverse. And what this does, as we come up, it protects these gun positions, where you have a gun position here, as well as a gun position over here, from fire. It gives the gunners that are stationed here the high ground, whereas anyone coming in and attacking from this side here would clearly be seen when there were no trees. Right here, this is one of the old magazines where they would have stored ammunition. And it's in great shape. This place, it's incredible. This fort started being constructed in 1861. Well, the planning, construction began in 1861 and ended in 1866. So these bricks, when these mortar lines were made by the man who did them, there was still really the Civil War raging in the United States. Looks like here someone's come and they make themselves a little fire, which I would say is like an incredibly bad idea, because you're just going to heat up through here. I mean, sure, there's maybe a little bit of an air vent there, but you're just going to crack the mortar, crack some of this, and cause the fort, the destruction of the fort, basically. These rocks here, you can see were once up, probably inside the side walls of the magazine. You can see how it's mortared. It's amazing. And again, the planning construction began in 1861, so ended in 1866, so this here is about 155 years old. It's in great condition, but I was here about a year ago, and none of that rubble was inside there. People were not having fires here. So someone's discovered the site. Over here, this is the dangerous part that I was talking about. Right here, we have the side of the magazine. And here, unfortunately, right here was a gun position, as well as right over here there was a second gun position. They no longer exist as of 2 years ago. They've come over the side of the bank due to erosion. You can see down there, that's a piece of the foundation which they would have put here before they put the gun emplacement in place, because of how sandy the subsoil was. As well, there's a huge land slippage that's occurred here. Looks like it's come down maybe 50 feet, but that bank 2 years ago was up in this location, and now it's slipped down, taking one gun emplacement as well as the second gun emplacement. And soon enough, it's going to take this powder magazine. So right here, someone's left a really sketchy rope down, which means that I have to go down there and show you guys exactly what I'm talking about with the erosion of this bank. Again, it's very dangerous to do this. I don't recommend you come here. So there, as we look back up, you can see one artillery emplacement. The second one is now here in rubble. And again, 2 years ago, if you were here, this would have been up there. Here in Redhead, they have a real problem with erosion. As you see, most of the soil around here, it's sand and very silty, so it's just getting eroded away. As you see how much we've lost, we're losing about a foot a year of the site to erosion. This is the old cemented or mortared together foundation that they would have had underneath the gun emplacement, as well as possibly the backside of this magazine. But it's all come down. So this is the southernmost turret ring, which there's nothing left at all of that gun position. This one here, you can see the foundation exactly the same as this, underneath all that other stone. Most of this stone that you see, like this purple rock here, this is all quarried relatively close to here. So possibly even at the foot of Red Rock in Redhead. Unfortunately, it's just a matter of time before the rest of this battery succumbs to the same fate as these two gun emplacements due to the erosion. And even now, I can hear the sand falling down. So here's a closer look at the foundation that the British engineers would have poured during the creation of the battery, and then the local stone which they would have gotten from nearby or maybe as far away as Red Rock. So by now you're probably wondering, why was there a fort built here? Why has it been forgotten? Why is it significant to Canadian Confederation as well as the American Civil War? Well, way back in 1861, when the Confederacy was winning battle after battle during the American Civil War, they sent 2 diplomats to Europe to try to have European powers recognize the Confederacy as their own nation. The Union at the time had a blockade. They were able to escape through this blockade and made it to Spanish Cuba. From there, they got onto a neutral British ship called the Trent. As the Trent was sailing back to England, it was captured by a Union ship, which then came aboard, inspected the vessel, found the 2 Confederate diplomats, took them prisoner, and then allowed the Trent to continue on its way to England. Well, by the time the Trent made it to England and told them what had happened, it put England's neutrality up for question. So then England started to prepare for war against the Union. So they were forced to send troops to Canada to increase the amount of troops that they had here in the Maritimes, as well as Lower and Upper Canada. At the time that the Trent was captured, it was in November. The St. Lawrence Seaway begins to freeze. So they were only able to get 1 boatload of reinforcements to Upper Canada before the St. Lawrence froze. After that, all those troops have to take the overland route through New Brunswick up to Quebec, and then down the St. Lawrence River all the way down to York if needed. Because of the risk that the Americans posed to this area, and especially to capturing New Brunswick, they had to do a survey. And here they realized that the defenses over on Partridge Island were not sufficient to protect the harbor, as well as some defenses over in Lower Cove, which is in the south end of St. John. Though that battery was just too ill-equipped and the artillery was so outdated it couldn't have defended the entrance to the harbor. As well as Partridge Island would have been a very precarious place as it's so isolated from any help at all due to the artillery range at the time. So what the British decided was to build 2 forts simultaneously here at Redhead and also over there in the lower west side at Negro Point. Both of these forts were constructed between 1861 onwards to 1866. Unfortunately, the one in the lower west side no longer exists in the state that it would have been in the 1860s, as that was deemed a more important and strategic location than here at Redhead. So they had upgraded it, and if you go there now, you have Fort Dufferin and you have artillery batteries with more modern guns, more modern cannons. So basically, the importance for Redhead Battery back in the 1860s with the threat of war with the Union was to protect this passage. And if you can imagine, the Courtney Bay breakwater didn't exist at that time, and you had a straight shot into Courtney Bay. And if you stuck to this coast, especially during a high tide, you would almost be out of range of the guns from Partridge Island. So they could have sailed and basically bypassed. So it meant that they needed to have a battery at this location. And by using coordinated fire from Redhead Battery, Partridge Island, and over here by Fort Dufferin, they could hold up a good defense of the city of St. John. Fortunately for all of us, by the time the Union government discovered that these two Confederate diplomats had been taken prisoner, and the reaction that Britain had with protecting their neutrality, the United States decided to release the 2 Confederate prisoners after a little over a month, which then avoided the war. But still, the battery at Redhead and the battery over by Fort Dufferin was still constructed, as well as the upgrades to Partridge Island. Originally, the design for the Redhead Battery and the battery found over by Fort Dufferin were identical. They both would have had 10 gun emplacements as well as 5 magazines. During construction, they found that the ground, which I mean, it's hard to tell now, it used to slope away, which would have given an advantage to any ships would have been able to shoot in and strafe along this whole section of guns. So what they decided was they would drop the number of gun emplacements to just 6, and they would also drop the amount of magazines down to only 2. So that's the difference here compared to the one found over there, which would have had all 10 guns and all 5 magazines before it was destroyed and became what is now basically a gravel pit. So here I am, I'm standing in the middle of one of the gun positions. This here is called the Embrasure, which is where the gun would have sat and been able to shoot out, aiming at ships that were coming in to attack St. John. Originally, the parapets, which are these side walls, they would have been this height, but then they also would have been up to a height of 8 feet due to the dirt, and then would have been 30 feet wide to stop any type of artillery or modern artillery that would have been able to hammer this position, especially with high explosive shells. For the defense of St. John, there were already 10 modern 100-pound Armstrong artillery pieces that were purchased and were in Halifax waiting to be delivered to Redhead, Partridge Island, and over at Negro Point, in case war was declared with the Union or the United States sometime after. These modern artillery pieces were actually able to fire conventional shells as we know it today, and not round cannonballs, which was the norm and the technology beforehand. Although there was some 68-pounder guns that were also ordered and would have been in the places in between that were shooting cannonballs still at the time. So due to the fact that Britain had all this surplus smoothbore artillery pieces, and because of the advancing technology, they still wanted to use these guns. So there was an invention that was made where they had a sleeve that was inserted into the smoothbore gun, and that would allow them to fire more modern artillery shells. So they were able to revamp all of these guns, and they actually continued to use those guns up until the 1920s, so after this First World War. So with these new sleeves that they had installed, they also had to manipulate some of their artillery pieces, where they would then put these lugs on the outer side of the shell, and then as it went through the rifling of the gun, it would spin out. So right here, this is the second gun magazine, and you can imagine 8 foot of dirt above it. This would have had a door originally to help protect the rounds and gunpowder. But because this fort is somewhat forgotten, it's in incredible shape. I mean, besides what the elements and the environment has done to it, it is in pristine condition. And actually, it is the last remaining battery of the 1860s left in all of Canada. So it's amazing to me to think about what the man might have been thinking about when he was mortaring these, and how much the world really has changed since that time. We have artillery position here, and the other artillery position here. So this is the last one, the Embrasure, which this fire position, that's completely filled in now. You wouldn't even be able to tell how the gun would have shot out. It's all overgrown here as well with these trees. But here, to give you a better idea, this gun position right here, especially this one, is set in such an orientation to defend into here, Courtney Bay. Whereas these other these other 5 are more towards the defense of Partridge Island and helping to keep ships from following along this coast and then into St. John this way. So here I am, I'm standing on one of the races that were put down for one of those 100-pound projectile shooting Armstrong guns. These races, they're made out of granite, and they were engineered to be flat and level. So right now, I'm gonna check to see how well those engineers did 155 years later. And if you want to take a look, it's level. So 155 years later, British engineering still working. So that's just a testament to how well these forts were built, and also how much money went into their design, and that they really wanted these to be a well protected position. Over here you can kind of see what the fort, or what the battery is made out of. So you have your local stone, and then here a little bit of brick that's fallen out. But as we go over to this position here, you can see the brick sliding out of the rock. So all these would have had the brick, and then the dirt on top, as well as the dirt protecting from artillery fire from ships. Now what I find interesting about this granite is the origin. It's hard to say where this came from. Most likely they would have got it from a local source, so this may be from St. George, and then would have been here and then engineered flat for the gun race. So you need to have it flat because you would have your wheels pivoting here and all along there to give you your field of fire into the harbor. But just an interesting thing. Maybe that's from England. I'm kind of thinking it's from St. George. Fortunately, this site never saw combat during the war, during the American Civil War, and those guns that were earmarked for here never arrived or never had to be delivered. It wasn't until 1878 that this position actually received guns, and they received 4 32-pound smoothbore artillery pieces. This site was then later used during the First World War as a training site. It wasn't until the Second World War that the guns were then taken out of here in a scrap metal drive and recycled. Also very interesting, during the Second World War, this position here at Redhead and also across at Sheldon's Point was used as a dummy artillery location. They had people out here that would drive vehicles around every so often, couple days a week, just to have fresh tracks, as well as where the artillery pieces would go. They had old telephone poles that they painted black to mimic the artillery. So if you ever had a spy driving along and they look over here, they think that the site is still being manned. They also had mannequins, so every so often, periodically, they would move these mannequins around as well as driving through the site. You can see here the erosion and how close we are to losing the entire site. Although the Redhead Battery was never used in combat, it did serve its purpose as a deterrent, and it really shows a testament to how well these fortifications were built, that no one ever came and tested them. No one ever came here to attack New Brunswick, and really, if they would have been able to take New Brunswick, the rest of the Dominion of Canada would have collapsed, as you would have cut off Nova Scotia. You would not have been able to resupply your troops in Upper and Lower Canada, and if it was the Americans, they would have simply just come in and attacked in Ontario and Quebec, and they would have been completely on their own until the spring. I want to thank you for coming here with us to the Redhead Battery and learning a little bit more about this forgotten fort and its significance before it is eventually taken by nature and is going to be over the bank, and we'll lose this site forever. Hopefully this site is a little bit less forgotten. Thanks for watching. So you remember when I said that there were 4 cannons at the Redhead Battery and that they were taken away to be used as scrap metal during the Second World War? Well, that wasn't entirely true. And you may have actually seen Redhead batteries before, because behind me, these 2 cannons are the last 2 cannons remaining from the Redhead Battery. They were brought here for this marine park, which is a burial ground where there's actually around 400 sailors buried in this small lot between these trees over to some trees over here. So you can see in between these trees and the trees over there, or where those other grave markers are, you have 400 sailors that are buried in this ground. Most of them don't actually have any graves. These sailors, they would have died sometimes in combat, but mostly they would have been just sailors that died on ships that were coming into St. John, or they died in the St. John Harbor. So then this is where they're buried. And there we are, the smooth bore. Still has the royal crest. So you never know. If you're from St. John, you may have already seen these cannons and had no idea where they had come from. Thanks for watching.